Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for tuning in and watching this segment of My Life as a. Today we're talking with Thomas, who is a therapist. So thank you for joining us, Thomas.
Thank you very much for having me. Yep.
Great. So my first question for you is, can you tell me a little bit about your work or what you do or anything like that?
Sure. So I'm a mental health therapist. Might be called a counselor, psychotherapist, depending who you ask. My technical term is therapist. I work as a therapist with teenagers who are struggling with suicide and self-harm. And I work with their families through a family-based program. And so, yeah, that's the big part of what I do is one-on-one counseling with the teenagers, one-on-one with parents sometimes, and then also family sessions together. So helping people work through pretty challenging times in sort of over a couple months of sort of helping people get through the worst crises at that time.
Yeah, that sounds like it's obviously a very important job and you're doing really good work. How did you get into this? Like, how did you come to this job? How did this come into your life?
Sure. Many different ways to kind of answer that, but I'll try to tell the most interesting one that's going to keep people watching this video. So the bottom line or the starting point would probably be I lived with my own mental health challenges for years since I was a young person. My earliest memory when I reflected back to my mother, she was able to say, "Oh yeah, you were about 6 at that time." So I was a fairly young kid who struggled a lot with anxiety and depression. Uh, and, but I lived in a family where we grew up and you didn't talk about your feelings. And you certainly didn't talk about mental health. In fact, I didn't have the language for it. I didn't even know what that was. And things just kind of got harder and harder for me as time went on, and I kind of suffered in silence. I didn't have anyone to talk to, friends or family-wise, because basically the idea was mental health was equated with, oh, then you're crazy and you're going to a, basically in my mind, it was like the, medieval asylums or something out of a horror film. Anyhow, so the long story short is eventually I couldn't keep all that in because I went off to university. I was studying ultimately to get into politics and had a mental health breakdown with the stress and isolation and other factors that get tough in life when you go off to university. And so that's where I first encountered the mental health system. And as much of a crisis moment that was for me, it was also this real turning point where I got to, fortunately for me, I was meeting with mental health professionals who helped me make a lot of sense of what I was going through. I was able to, again, for, if I was about, 15 years of kind of struggling with mental health on my own, here was the first time I was able to talk about things and people say, oh yeah, that's what this is. There's a word for that. We call it anxiety and here's what it looks like. And millions of people have it. And it was like, oh, I'm not alone in this. So that was a real sort of, I guess, a watershed moment in terms of getting me into the world of mental health. Can you remind me the question again? Because I don't want to get too lost.
Yeah, I just wondered how you kind of got to this point where you wanted to do this. And then even if you have like some interesting stories that you wanted to share about your journey to that point even.
Okay. Thank you for the reminder. So yeah, this leads into the interesting part is ultimately I just wanted to fix my mental health and have no more to do with it. I just wanted to be a problem that was solved and gone. And so I did work, I did this sort of counseling and therapy and all the different things that I was supposed to work on, and I improved my mental health quite a bit. But it would come back. I'd have times where it would be challenging and, anxiety would go up and depression would follow. And so it got really frustrating because this thing that I wanted to get rid of just kept coming back and I didn't understand why. And ultimately, I guess the interesting story for me is I wanted nothing to do with therapy, and then I became a therapist when I actually was very much interested in sort of changing the world. You know, I'm a very, very idealistic young person, I suppose, and continue to be. I think that's why I fit well with teenagers in the work that I do. Um, so I actually went off on a trip. I did this solo backpacking trip through woofing, which is this exchange you do to work on organic farms. I actually ended up in Israel, stayed a couple months on a commune there. It was a non-religious commune, but it was a commune that, as I learned, was actually all about, these were all people who had left Jerusalem, who were frustrated with the stress and the rat race that they had lived in that urban society. And they were really interested in, like, how can we make our daily life really fulfilling and really healthy for our mental health, our spiritual health, all of that. Basically, because they were part of a peer support group in Jerusalem. And they were like, well, what if we just change, you know, how we lived and what we did? Because they found they were complaining about a lot of frustrations with the rat race, right? So anyhow, so I end up there, and what drew me there was, at that time I was really interested in politics and changing society, and still am. Uh, and I wanted to see and believe in a place that did things differently, a place that just said, yeah, let's do things differently and maybe life can be better. So I went there and I saw that and I loved it. It was absolutely amazing and inspiring. And based on the nature of some of my anxieties and depression, travel can be very difficult for me. The isolation, being far from my home base, is very difficult. And so sure enough, you know, fairly predictable for me, my anxiety and depression started climbing again. And it was really frustrating because here I was in this amazing experience that I wanted to be a part of, and I really didn't want to leave, but I was getting more ill. So anyway, so then I had to come home early because of that, because of my mental health struggles, and very much felt kind of robbed of the opportunity. I wanted to stay there a long time. And when I got back, I got really angry at my mental health challenges. And the question I remember asking myself is, why does this not leave me? Why does this keep coming back? I seem to do really well, and then it comes back. And then I decided, there was some moment in there that I decided, oh, maybe mental health is my work. Maybe that's my thing. It's not something I'm supposed to leave. It's something I'm supposed to stay with and be a part of. And the long story short of that is, I decided at that point I wanted to use my experiences to actually help others and help people through that journey, just as I had been helped through it. And I also wanted to not just help people individually, but kind of change communities, change the world, so that we lived in a world that made mental health, healthy mental health, easier to access. So I thought about becoming a therapist, but I was like, I had already done 2 degrees and I did not want to do much more school. And so I decided, you know, I didn't want to go and become a psychologist or a psychiatrist, because that would have been much more time at school. And so I remembered back to a counselor I had in university during that first mental health breakdown. And they really helped me through as I got back into university. And I remembered what they were, and they were a social worker. They had a master's of social work. And so I actually just Googled that, looked it up, and found out, oh, wow, this is exactly who I am. This is all I'm about. So social work in a nutshell is about working on society. How do we improve society? How do we change programs, policies, and not just change people, but change how the community supports people. So that fit perfectly with where I was at, which was this love and passion for mental health, as well as not just dealing with people as patients, but dealing with them, helping them work through life and the world, and helping change the world to support them better. So yeah, that's my long story short of how I ended up in a commune in the desert, had some mental health challenges that wouldn't go away and decided I wanted to get into it. So I discovered that an MSW, Masters of Social Work, is a way you can actually become a therapist in Ontario. Practice gives you a lot of opportunities there. So then I went back to school for a couple more degrees.
So, so obviously Masters of Social Work is one way that you can pursue counseling. There's some other different options as well. If somebody was interested in this as a career path, what kind of special like characteristics or personality traits do you think would be make them really good for this position or this kind of a job?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think a really important question anyone looking to go into the field should be asking themselves. Because as I kind of describe it, it's not a job that's just based on, I don't know how to put it. It's very much a calling is how I talk about it, is the tool of my trade is me and my personality and my traits and my history, my stories, who I am as a person is what I bring into my therapeutic interactions with people. So yeah, it's not a part-time gig. It's not something that kind of stands outside of yourself. So if you think of yourself as someone who wants to just do a job for sort of 9 to 5, get that done, but then live your life outside of that very differently, it's probably going to be a hard fit because maybe one of the things I'd recommend is if your friends or family or people have said, you know, they might have even called you the therapist, the family therapist, you're the good listener, you're the one we go to for advice. And that has its own challenges when you're a brother or sister or whatever you might be in a relationship. But as a therapist, being a very good listener is probably the number one skill. With that, I think is patience. I think patience is a big part, and I'm kind of known to be very patient. I'm a Taurus, and I'm also very stubborn. And I think patience and stubbornness have some connection. Because to be a good therapist, I think you have to be able to walk beside people through their journey and sort of be able to see the outcomes and see a future for them that they don't see just yet. But you can't rush it, and you can't just say, well, come on, why aren't you there yet? You have to remember that while you're seeing them beside the journey, they still have to go through it. It's much like I always have to remember that even though I've gone through my own mental health journey, no one's is like mine, and mine is not like anyone else's, and I can't expect people to go through things the same way. So I have to be patient and persistent and have a lot of, I guess that'd be another thing. I think you have to be a fairly hopeful person. You have to have the idea that things are workable, things can change. It's not to say things always do change, but the belief that everything can change, so that if you put the work in it, if you've got the right people, surround yourself with caring people, you can do that. So I think those are pretty key. Oh, okay, yeah, one really big one, which would probably be, I know one of your questions there is about life advice.
Yeah.
So one big trait would be you have to be a very non-judgmental person. You have to be able to look at people as legitimately doing the best they can, even when they're doing some pretty terrible behaviors, really understanding, you know, that that's someone who's struggling, and if they could do better, they would do better, and they just need some help getting unstuck. They just need some extra help to see things differently so they can find their way out. But judgment really, if you feel very inclined to judge people or quick to judge, it can be very difficult to do the work that I do as a therapist, because often people are, that's the nature of their crisis, is behaviors, beliefs, thought patterns, different things aren't working for them. And it's easy to stand outside and be like, well, yeah, it's not working for you. Why are you doing that? You know, you big dummy. Well, they're not. They're very intelligent. They're very smart, and they're doing the best they can with what they know and what's available to them. And if you judge them, you're going to miss all of those strengths and all of the reasons why they're stuck. and you won't be able to get out. You'll be just as stuck. If you're judgmental, you'll get just as stuck in your own judgments.
Okay. Yeah, so that's all. That's for people who want to be a therapist, that's really helpful to know. Since you've had such an interesting journey and interesting life, you've lived a lot of different experiences. So do you have any kind of life advice for just anybody to kind of, help them get through and, make it through the day? We're in kind of a really crazy time right now, so that would be helpful too.
I think, and as I'm going through this quarantine as well, through the pandemic, I'm learning just how important my relationships are, the people I'm connected to. All of my mental health practices that I do to keep myself well and to keep myself stable, including, for me, physical exercise and routine is really important. All of that sort of pales in comparison to how important it is that I keep meaningful relationships with the people who really love me and care about me. Even as simple as some of those relationships can be, even if it's just the kindness from a friend that I only see every now and then, or whether it's this really close connection I have with a family member. How important, I think pre-quarantine, how busy everyone was and still are, I gotta be fair about that. Sometimes we forget how important those relationships can be because there's so much to do. And I think it's really one of the blessings I've had in the quarantine, again, not to sugarcoat something that's pretty tough for a lot of people and includes a lot of suffering and loss, is just that reminder of how important people are. So yeah, I think fostering a sense of gratitude has also been really important in my life. Being grateful for all the good that I do have, and always remaining hopeful. And I think that's, when you look back on my story of all these challenges and mental health crises that kept coming back, one of the lessons I learned about myself, because at first I looked at it as I was weak, I kept falling, I kept stumbling. And so that was a sign that clearly something wrong with me. And then over time, I actually was able to see that and not sugarcoating, but just see that, well, actually, you keep having these really difficult things happen and you keep getting back up. And in fact, that says how strong you are. And so I think that's, if I can give some word of advice to people right now is, the pandemic, the quarantine, all the difficulties that we're going through right now, they will come to an end and people will get through them and we will lose people we love. There is going to, it's not going to be without loss. And at the same time, there still is a future, there is a tomorrow. And to remember that, as humans, we're a lot stronger than we think we are. And we are our strongest and we are our best when we stay connected with one another and take care of one another. Which I guess I would definitely have to say as a therapist, what's very important is also taking care of yourself. Don't just take care of everyone else and try and be a hero because you'll break down and then other people will fall too. So we're our best when we're sort of interconnected, supporting each other. That's the best life advice you're going to get from a 37-year-old at this point. I've got much life to live, hopefully, knock on wood. So maybe I'll have some better advice in the future.
Well, I think that's great. And I think that gives people a lot to chew on, but also I think it's something that maybe we're sensing anyway, like the hashtag is in it together or however it goes. I can't remember what the exact one is, but yeah, so this idea that staying connected, I think, is really important. And I'm hoping that these kind of videos also help with that as well, that people can see other people and learn about different people's experiences, and that can help as well. Was there anything else you felt you wanted to share or talk about, or anything else?
I think that's pretty good for now.
Okay. Okay, so thanks very much, Thomas, for joining us and sharing your wisdom and your experience and your journey with us. I think it's really important to talk about these things as well. And I hope everybody who watched enjoyed it, and everybody stay safe, and thank you for taking the time to watch us. All right, thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye.